So, 3 years ago, I met Jeremy at this Starbucks on 5th Street. You know, the one where the AC is always blasting and makes everyone look like they're freezing. She was sitting at that corner table with the wobbly leg, trying to balance her laptop on this uneven surface, and I just thought, okay, she's cute, but also kind of a mess. Her hair was in this messy bun with 3 different hair ties holding it together. And she had this chipped coffee mug with some faded logo I couldn't even read anymore. I mean, I wasn't really looking for anything serious at the time. I was 25 and trying to get my whole consulting thing off the ground, which basically meant I was broke and living in this studio apartment where the bathroom door didn't close all the way. But Jeremy seemed different, you know? She actually listened when I talked about work stuff, and she didn't immediately start planning our future or whatever. We took things really slow, which honestly was perfect, because I had zero money for fancy dates. Most of the time we just hang out at her place, which was this 1 bedroom with carpet that had seen better days and a kitchen where only 2 of the 4 burner worked. But it was clean, and she always had actual food in the fridge, not just leftover takeout containers like my place. The thing about me is, I basically raised my 4 younger siblings after my parents decided they were done being parents when I was 14. Connor, Tyler, Ella, and Eli became my responsibility, and I spent my entire teenage years making sure they had clean clothes and did their homework and ate actual meals. So by the time I was an adult, the last thing I wanted was more kids to take care of. I'd already done that, you know? About a year into dating Jeremy, we were sitting in her living room on that brown couch with the sagging middle cushion, watching some Netflix show, and she brought up the future. Not in a pushy way, just where do you see this going kind of thing. And I was honest with her. I told her about my siblings, about how I'd already been a parent when I should have been a kid myself, and how I was completely done with that chapter of my life. I remember she was eating cereal straight from the box, those honey nut things. And she just nodded and said she totally got it. She said she wasn't really the maternal type anyway, and with both of us trying to get our careers going, kids would just be this huge financial burden we couldn't handle. We were both making nothing at the time. I was barely covering my rent, and she was working at this marketing firm where they treated her like garbage and paid her even worse. So we agreed. No kids. Maybe someday way in the future if things changed dramatically. But for now, we were going to focus on building something together first. It felt so good to be with someone who actually understood that you don't have to follow this weird timeline everyone expects, you know? Not everyone needs to get married at 25 and pop out babies immediately. For the next 2 years, things were pretty good. Jeremy got a better job at this tech startup downtown, and my consulting thing started picking up actual clients. We both moved to better apartments, and we'd spend most weekends together, usually at her place because she had a actual couch instead of just folding chairs and a TV that wasn't from 2010. The money thing was still tight for both of us, but we started talking about maybe moving in together to split costs. I mean, it made sense financially. We were spending most of our time together anyway, and rent in this city is just insane. Her lease was up in March, and we figured we could find something together that would save us both $400 a month. So we started looking at places in February. Nothing fancy, just a decent 2-bedroom where we could each have our own space, but share the kitchen and living room. We found this place on Maple Street that was perfect. Hardwood floors, decent neighborhood, and the rent split between us was actually manageable. The bathroom had this weird pink tile from the 70s, but whatever, it was clean and the water pressure was good. We put down the deposit and planned to move in together in 2 weeks. I'd already started packing my stuff in these cardboard boxes I got from behind the liquor store down the street. Most of my furniture was garbage anyway, so it was mainly just clothes and books and kitchen stuff. Jeremy had the better furniture, so we figured we'd use most of hers and I'd just bring the essentials. I was actually kind of excited about it. Not in this romantic, next step in our relationship way, but more finally I'll have a decent place to live and extra money to actually save for once. Plus, Jeremy was pretty easy to live with. She wasn't one of those people who leaves dishes in the sink for days or uses all the hot water. She kept her space clean without being weird and controlling about it. But then, like a week before we were supposed to move in together, Jeremy started acting strange. Not obvious strange, just like off. She'd zone out in the middle of conversations, and she kept checking her phone constantly. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd just say she was stressed about the move, which seemed reasonable enough. The day we were supposed to start moving my stuff over, I showed up at her apartment around 10 in the morning with my first load of boxes. I had to make like 3 trips because my car is this old Honda Civic that barely fits anything. The back seat was crammed with garbage bags full of clothes, and I had this box of kitchen stuff that kept sliding around every time I turned a corner. Jeremy was sitting on the arm of her couch when I walked in, not the actual seat, but like perched on the side, which she only did when she was nervous about something. She was wearing this gray sweater with a small hole near the left elbow, and her hair was in one of those messy ponytails that looked like she'd just twisted it up without looking in a mirror. I set the boxes down by the door and was about to go get the next load when she said she wanted to talk about something. The way she said it made me stop. Because it had that tone, you know? Like when someone's about to tell you something they think you're not going to want to hear. So I sat down on the actual couch cushion, and she stayed perched on the arm, fidgeting with this loose thread on her sweater. The apartment smelled like that vanilla candle she always burned, the cheap one from the dollar store that honestly just smelled like fake cake mix. There was this water stain on the ceiling above the TV that looked like a weird blob, and I found myself staring at it while she started talking. She said she'd been doing some thinking about us, about our future, about what we really wanted. And I'm thinking, okay, where is this going? Because we literally just signed a lease together. Then she drops this bomb about how she's been reconsidering the whole kids thing. I'm still staring at that ceiling stain, and I'm like, what do you mean reconsidering? We had this conversation, we agreed. Both of us were clear about not wanting kids, especially not right now when we're still figuring out our careers and money situation. But she keeps going, talking about how she's been watching her sister with her new baby and how it made her realize she might be missing out on something important. Her sister Chloe, who's married to this guy with a decent job and lives in the suburbs with an actual house and a yard. Not exactly our situation, you know? I could feel this weird hollow feeling starting in my stomach, like when you realize you left your phone somewhere and can't remember where. Jeremy was doing these dramatic hand gestures, waving her arms around like she was trying to convince me of something, and the morning light coming through her blinds was showing all these dust particles floating in the air. And then she says the thing that really made me realize where this was heading. She said she's not just thinking about kids in general, she's thinking about having a baby now. Soon. Like, this year. I finally looked directly at her instead of the ceiling stain, and I said, "Are you kidding me right now? We just put down a deposit on an apartment. We agreed on being child-free. We both make barely enough money to support ourselves, let alone a kid. What changed in the last month that suddenly made this seem like a good idea?" She got all defensive and started talking about how people figure it out, how you don't need to have everything perfect before you start a family. And I'm thinking, okay, but we literally agreed that we did want to have things figured out first. That was the whole point of our conversation last year. The coffee in my mug was getting cold. It was that chipped one with the faded logo that she never threw away, even though it looked like garbage. I could hear the neighbor's TV through the thin walls, some morning talk show with people laughing too loud at jokes that probably weren't even funny. Then Jeremy really threw me off by saying she wasn't just thinking about it anymore. She was pregnant. I just stared at her for a second, because how? We're both women. I mean, obviously I know how pregnancy works in general, but specifically in our situation, how exactly did this happen? And that's when she tells me about Dean. Dean is this guy she works with, apparently. I'd heard his name mentioned a few times, but I thought he was just some coworker. Turns out they'd been hanging out after work sometimes, getting drinks, talking about life stuff. And one thing led to another. And well, now she's pregnant. She's sitting there telling me this like it's just something that happened. Like she accidentally bought the wrong kind of milk or something. Not like she cheated on me and got pregnant by some random guy from her office. I asked her when this happened, and she said about a month ago. A month. So she's known for weeks, and just didn't mention it while we were apartment hunting and signing leases and planning our future together. But here's the part that really got me. She starts going on about how this is actually a good thing for us. How Dean was just a means to an end. And now we can have the family she's realized she wants. She keeps saying she did it for us and how the pregnancy is a beautiful thing that we can embrace together. I mean, what did she expect me to say? Congratulations on cheating and getting knocked up. Let's raise someone else's kid together? She's doing these big dramatic gestures with her hands, and her voice is getting higher, like it does when she's trying to sound more emotional than she actually is. The whole thing felt like watching someone perform in a play. Except the play was terrible, and I didn't audition for a part in it. I told her this was insane. Like, actually insane. You don't just cheat on someone and then present the pregnancy like it's a gift you're giving them. That's not how relationships work, and it's definitely not how having kids works. But she kept pushing, saying how if I really loved her, I'd see this as an opportunity for us to grow together. How lots of couples work through infidelity and come out stronger. How the baby could bring us closer and give us a purpose. And then, I swear this actually happened, she asked me to marry her. Right there, sitting on the arm of her couch with the sagging cushions, in her gray sweater with the hole in the elbow, she asked me to marry her so we could be a proper family for this baby she conceived by cheating on me with Dean from her office. I looked at her and said, "So let me get this straight. You cheat on me, get pregnant, and now you're expecting me to just marry you and live happily ever after?" She said yes, basically. Like it was obvious. Like, of course, I'd want to completely change my life plans to accommodate her terrible decisions. I stood up to leave, but she jumped up too and grabbed my wrist. Not hard, but enough to stop me from walking toward the door. She started crying, which honestly felt pretty manipulative given the circumstances, and saying how she couldn't do this alone and how we'd already made all these plans together. I told her that the plans we made were based on completely different information. Like, the plan was no kids and no cheating, and she'd managed to violate both those pretty major agreements in the span of a month. She kept holding onto my wrist and saying how I was being unreasonable, how people make mistakes, but that doesn't mean you throw away 3 years together. How if I really loved her, I'd stay, and we'd figure it out together. But here's the thing. I wasn't throwing away 3 years. She already did that when she decided to sleep with Dean and lie to me about it for weeks, while we planned a future that was apparently built on complete fantasy. I pulled my wrist away and told her I needed to call someone to help me get my stuff. Because obviously I wasn't moving in anymore, and I needed to get my boxes out of her apartment and figure out what to do about the lease we'd signed. She started following me around the apartment, still crying and talking about how we could work through this if I just gave her a chance. How the baby wasn't even Dean's really, it was ours because she did it for us. That's when I called my brother Tom. He's 24 and has this truck that's perfect for moving stuff, plus he's generally good in weird situations. I told him I needed him and our younger brother Tyler to come help me move some stuff ASAP, and he said they'd be there in 20 minutes. Jeremy was getting more upset while I was on the phone, saying how I was being dramatic and not giving her a chance to explain properly. How I was keeping her away from the motherhood she'd realized she wanted, and how I was being selfish by not considering what she needed. I hung up with Tom and told her that what she needed was to figure out her situation with Dean because I wasn't going to be part of whatever this was supposed to be. She said Dean didn't matter, he was just the biological father, but I would be the real parent. Like that was supposed to be appealing somehow. Like I'd want to raise a kid that existed because my girlfriend cheated on me. When Tom and Tyler showed up, Tyler brought Tom's dog for some reason, this golden retriever mix that's always happy about everything. Jeremy was in full breakdown mode. Crying, talking about how I was abandoning her, how we were supposed to be partners. I introduced my brothers and explained the basic situation, which was pretty awkward but necessary since they needed to understand why we were suddenly moving my stuff out instead of in. Tom just nodded and asked where my boxes were. Tyler asked if Jeremy was okay, because she was still crying pretty hard. The dog was wagging its tail and trying to get everyone to pet him, completely oblivious to the drama happening around him. That's when Jeremy really lost it. She started yelling about how I was ruining everything, how I was being cruel and heartless. She grabbed one of my books, some paperback novel I'd read like 3 times, and threw it at me. It didn't hurt, but the pages scattered everywhere, and it was just so unnecessarily dramatic. I told Tom and Tyler to just grab my stuff so we could leave, but Jeremy kept getting in the way, trying to block them from taking my boxes. She was saying how I couldn't just walk away from 3 years together, how I owed her more than this. But what did I owe her exactly? I didn't owe her a marriage proposal just because she got pregnant by someone else. I didn't owe her a complete life change because she decided to cheat and then frame it as something she did for our relationship. The whole thing escalated when she tried to grab another box away from Tyler, and I stepped between them to tell her to stop. She scratched my arm, not deep, but enough to leave these red marks on my forearm. Tom's dog started barking because everyone was yelling, and I could see the neighbors across the hall opening their door to see what was going on. I just wanted to get out of there. The whole situation was insane, and Jeremy was acting like I was the one being unreasonable. Like I was supposed to just accept that she'd completely blown up our relationship and our plans, and then thank her for the opportunity to raise Dean's baby with her. Tom and Tyler got most of my important stuff: clothes, laptop, the kitchen things I actually used. The furniture wasn't worth fighting over, and honestly, I just wanted to leave before Jeremy did something even more dramatic. As we were loading the last box into Tom's truck, Jeremy came outside still crying and asking me to reconsider. She said she'd made a mistake, but that didn't mean we couldn't work through it. How couples deal with infidelity all the time and come out stronger. I told her that maybe some couples do, but those couples probably don't involve one person cheating specifically to get pregnant and then proposing marriage as a solution. Like there's working through problems and then there's completely losing your mind. The scratch on my arm was stinging a little, and Tom's dog was trying to lick my hand from the truck window. Tyler asked where I was going to stay. And I said I'd figure it out. Tom said I could crash at his place until I found something else, which was nice of him since his apartment is tiny and he didn't really have space for a house guest. Jeremy kept standing there on the sidewalk as we drove away, and I could see her in the side mirror getting smaller until we turned the corner. The whole thing felt surreal, like I'd woken up in someone else's life where nothing made sense anymore. At Tom's place, I sat on his couch, which was way more comfortable than Jeremy's, and tried to process what had just happened. 3 years of dating, gone because she decided to cheat and then present it as some kind of gift. The dog curled up next to me and put his head on my lap, which was honestly the most normal thing that had happened all day. Tom made coffee in his kitchen while I used his bathroom to clean the scratches on my arm. They weren't deep, just surface scratches, but they stung when I put antiseptic on them. In the mirror, I looked tired and kind of shocked, like someone who'd just been in a minor car accident. Tyler asked if I was okay, and honestly, I was mostly just annoyed. Frustrated and irritated that Jeremy had wasted all this time and energy on something that was obviously never going to work. I mean, what did she think was going to happen? That I'd be thrilled about raising a baby that existed because she cheated on me? The whole marriage proposal thing was especially weird. Even if I had wanted kids, even if I was okay with the cheating somehow, why would that make me want to get married? We'd never even talked about marriage before. It felt like she was just throwing out random relationship milestones, hoping something would stick. I called the landlord about the apartment we were supposed to move into and explained that there had been a change in circumstances. Luckily, we were still within the grace period to back out without losing the whole deposit, but it was still a huge hassle, and I lost like $200 in application fees. That night, sleeping on Tom's couch with the dog taking up half the space, I kept thinking about how Jeremy had said she did it for us. Like cheating was some kind of favor she was doing for our relationship. It was such a weird way to think about it, like she'd convinced herself that getting pregnant by Dean was actually an act of love or something. The next few days were all about practical stuff, finding a new apartment, dealing with the lease situation, figuring out where to put my stuff. Tom was cool about letting me stay temporarily, but his place really was too small for two people long term. Jeremy texted me a few times, apologizing and asking if we could talk. She said she understood why I was upset, but that she hoped I'd reconsider once I'd had time to process everything. She kept saying how good we were together and how we could make it work if I just gave her a chance. But we weren't good together if she thought cheating and lying were acceptable ways to handle wanting something I didn't want. That's not a small disagreement you work through. That's a fundamental difference in how you treat people you're supposed to care about. I found a studio apartment about 2 weeks later. Not as nice as the place we were going to share, but affordable and available immediately. It was in this older building where the radiator made weird noises and the bathroom was tiny, but it was mine, and I didn't have to coordinate with anyone else about lease terms or move-in dates. Moving into my own place felt good. Quiet. No drama. No one asking me to reconsider major life decisions. No one crying about how I was ruining their dreams of motherhood. Just me and my stuff, and a space where I could think clearly for the first time in weeks. I never heard what happened with Jeremy and Dean and the baby. I blocked her number after the third day of apologetic texts, and we didn't have mutual friends who would give me updates. Honestly, I didn't want to know. Whatever mess she'd created with her cheating and her dramatic proposals and her weird justifications, that was her problem to solve. Looking back, I think the weirdest part was how she seemed to genuinely believe that I should have been grateful. Like she'd done me this huge favor by cheating and getting pregnant, and I was being unreasonable by not embracing it. It was like she'd created this whole fantasy in her head where her terrible decisions were actually gifts to our relationship. But that's the thing about people who cheat, and then try to make it your fault somehow. They convince themselves that they had good reasons, that they were actually thinking about you when they betrayed you. Jeremy really seemed to believe that sleeping with Dean was something she did for us, not something she did because she wanted to, and didn't care how it would affect me. The whole experience made me realize how important it is to pay attention when someone shows you who they really are. Jeremy showed me that she was someone who would lie for weeks, cheat when she wanted something I didn't want to give her, and then expect me to be grateful for the opportunity to clean up her mess. So yeah, that's how my 3-year relationship ended. Not with some big romantic gesture or mutual decision to part ways, but with her throwing books at me in her apartment, while my brothers loaded my stuff into a truck and her neighbor's dog wagged his tail like it was all just a fun game. Sometimes I wonder if she ever figured out how insane the whole thing was. Like, if she ever realized that I cheated and got pregnant for us isn't actually a compelling argument for marriage. But honestly, I don't really care. I'm just glad I got out before I got any more tangled up in whatever weird fantasy she was living in.